I would like to call to order the March 9th, 2017 meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee. Madam Secretary, let the record show that all members are present with the exception of Councilman Benny Johnson. Item number 2 is our invocation and followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask you to stand for that. And tonight, Councilman Joseph will deliver the invocation.
Please bow our head. Dear Lord, I want you to bless us to make the right decision for Ascension Parish as we do this afternoon. And once again, oh Lord, bless all the armed forces service members that protect this great country and give us the freedom to speak. And also, dear Lord, bless this great parish, state, and this great country. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair thanks Councilman Joseph for the invocation. Item number 3, public comment period. Anyone wishing to, well, I can skip that. I see no one from the public here. In fact, I don't see anyone from the administration, legal counsel, the parish president, or anyone other than these council members here. And more about that later. So we'll dispense with public comment. Number 4, approval of our January 12, 2017 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Lawler and second by Councilman Joseph to accept the meetings. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion carries. Minutes are accepted. Item number 5 is approval of our February 9th, 2017 minutes.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Councilman Caglialotti.
Second.
And second by Councilman Lawler to approve the February 9th, 2017 minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, that motion carries as well. Item number 6 then is our proposed outdoor burning ordinance for Ascension Parish. I'll turn this over to Councilman Lawler in just a minute. Just a brief remark, because I promised OJ we'd be out quick this afternoon, and I believe that's going to be the case. Historically, this got started in this committee. We had several meetings on it, and without going into a lot of detail, we'll let Mr. Lawler talk about that in a minute. We decided as a councilman by motion and vote to send it to the full council. We did that at the council's last meeting for discussion purposes, because we made no recommendation because we frankly couldn't agree on whether to even have the ordinance, much less what form it would take. The full council deferred it back to us. I guess what they're telling us, folks, and I think that's what I'm getting out of this, is they want a recommendation one way or another before they act on it. So I think it's either stuck in this committee or it dies in this committee. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lawler. I would also say that one of the things that it was deferred for, one of the reasons is because we wanted to check with APSO, and so hopefully, Mr. Lawler, you're going to tell us what happened with your meeting with Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Councilman Satterley. First of all, it's the burn ordinance. We've seen it before, piece by piece. I did speak with I want to say Colonel Weber, but I may be incorrect on that. Enforcement of this would not be an issue. It's something the Sheriff's Office could certainly do. However, in talking to the Sheriff's Office and in talking to others and talking to people at the Fire Department and a couple calls to people in DEQ is the proper parties to enforce this sort of thing. So first of all, regardless of where this goes tonight, I'd like to encourage the public if they do see burning of plastics, non-wood products, creosote logs, anything of that sort, I encourage you to contact the DEQ immediately, because this does pose a serious health risk if you're around it, and you can't get away from it. Simple as that. But basically, this is our burn ordinance. This is something that I believe is important for the parish, but I also know that we have a lot of areas of the parish that feel that they still want the right and the ability to burn things. This is something that does mimic state law. State law already prescribes everything that's in here. It's something I strongly believe in. I just don't know if it's something that is going to be able to go forward. I do offer it up. I move that we move this forward, but I will leave it at that. Thank you.
So it's been motioned by Councilman Lawler that that we approve the existing language, and I would only add that language was given to me by legal counsel O'Neill Parrington. It is modeled after, as Aaron just said, I think he said Gonzales law and state law. We now have heard that enforcement is likely not to be an issue. So I need a second to that motion, or it dies in committee.
Comment?
Certainly. The chair recognizes Mr. Joseph.
Yeah, I know I had seconded this before, and I'm also recommended to come back, but after talking to several councilmen, and, I think we just beating us, I think Mr. Lawless was doing what he did and everything, but I think this thing here would not go any further than this committee. And so I'm not going to recommend to second it, because I just don't think it's going to go, because the state have a law, the fire department, they all goes to the state law. And once again, I'm just not going to second this because of that. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Mr. Cagnolati, do you have anything to add or subtract?
Yeah, basically, I've spoken to some constituents and some other people. There was a tremendous problem, from my understanding, in Gonzales, and they enacted a law, but they basically duplicated what the state said. They have a local full-time fire department, fire chief that's there, and when they get a call, they can react. I don't know for sure whether they're the ones that enforce their ordinance or not. But if there's a question of enforcement, and it seems to be a DEQ, which is a state-level agency that would be handling it, versus the sheriff could go out, and who would cite who, and how much would the penalties are stipulated here, but if it's a repeat of the state law, then I see no need for us to have it duplicated.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. One comment I'd make about this before we proceed to a vote, because I am going to second this in a moment, and I'd like to remind my colleagues that is the privilege of the chair, according to Robert's Rules of Order, that they can enter into, especially when you have small deliberative bodies such as we have this afternoon, only 4 individuals present, to discuss as well as motion as well as to vote. And unlike what I consider erroneous thinking that I hear sometimes in this council, that can only be the chairman voting to break a tie. The rules actually state to break a tie or otherwise affect an outcome. But I'd like to state this, as far as the idea of the state having a law that's out there and therefore could be enforced. Obviously, the Gonzales law would not apply. One of the clear differences then is that when the law would be broken, if we had a local law, then the penalties in said law, the fines, when you're burning those automobile tires and so forth that Mr. Lawler spoke about, that money would go to the parish, versus if the sheriff came out or any other law enforcement entity to charge a violator of the state burn ordinance, we would get no revenue. So I guess my colleagues have considered that as well, but even if not, we're a democratic society. I'm going to go ahead and second Mr. Lawler's motion and then call, well, I can't call Madam Secretary since she's not here for a roll call vote, but I will serve in her stead, which means I'm sure I'm going to get a pay raise since I'm now doing her duties. But,
well, if that's the case, I'll do it.
Okay, so it's been moved, just for the record, by Councilman, for when the secretaries do review this to produce our minutes in the future, by Councilman Lawler to accept what's in everyone's packet as a recommendation to the full council as a burn ordinance for Ascension Parish, and second by myself. Any further discussion? Any objection?
Yes.
Hearing one, Madam Secretary, Doc, we'll have a roll call here. Councilman Joseph?
No.
Councilman Sadley? Yes. Councilman Lawler?
Yes.
Councilman Cagnolati?
No.
Okay, we have a 2-2 tie, so the motion dies for lack of majority. We will not have a burn ordinance in Ascension Parish. Okay, that actually went smoother than I thought. I would like to join my colleague to my right, Councilman Joseph in stating we want to thank Aaron Lawler for the work that he did do on it. I think Aaron and I probably want this more than most, and we can understand that because unlike a lot of councilmen, we do not have very rural parishes anymore up in the 70769 zip code. It's highly, highly dense, and we do, both of us, I know for a fact, I do for sure, and I've discussed it with Aaron, I know he does too, get a lot of calls about children who live in these subdivisions and their parents, asthmatic children that are having respiratory problems when this all started when these developers start the new subdivisions and they burn for literally days on end for a week or more in time, as well as and I've said this before, the cleaning of the swimming pools, the cinders and soot and whatever that gets on people's houses. I'm always asked who's going to power wash it. I guess my response is going to be take it up with the folks that don't want it. But as I said, we're a democratic society, so that's none. And quite frankly, glad to have this off the plate because it has been going on for a while, and I think we owe it to the people to resolve issues one way or another. With that said, it's a good segue to our final issue before we adjourn this afternoon. I don't know how far we go on it. I do have some remarks to make. I'll let everyone else go first, even though rank has its privilege. But item 7 is a discussion of the reworking and increasing specificity. And those two words, by the way, came from our Director of Planning and Development, Jerome Fournier, in correspondence I had back with him before our last meeting, the first time we considered this item, because he's in communion with me that it does need to be reworked, and its specificity needs to be increased. The ULDC, that's Unified Land Development Code, Appendix 4 subdivision regulations, and particularly, gentlemen, I'm referencing Section 17401I, which talks about information about improving traffic impact studies required of new developments in Ascension Parish. It does list me in parentheses as the person leading the discussion. That's a misprint. I directed the secretaries, and somehow it didn't translate into the outcome I desired. Mr. Fournier was supposed to lead the discussion tonight. Before I make remarks about that, he's not here. We'll talk about that in a moment. I thought we would just, we're all dressed up. We came here, hear a little bit from the committee at what I'm going to call tonight round 2, which is likely going to result in round 3 or more of this particular item. So the chair would entertain anyone that would like to speak on this issue. Mr. Lawler.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I do believe that we do need to rework our traffic studies as it regards to subdivisions and other developments. What we've seen over the years, we have a lot of studies that are done, but the studies show that there will be little impact or that there's not going to be a significant impact, but we all know that we've had more and more traffic. Now, part of this has to do with how the studies are related to the current road problems. If you have a road that is already a D road and the study shows that it's going to worsen the road but not past the D road, they're saying that there's no impact. And I think that's something that we have to look at is maybe the criteria that's used as to whether or not we can require new developments to provide assistance to the parish to alleviate our traffic woes. Another part of it is the accuracy of the traffic impact studies. I say this from the belief that they do not seem to be accurate. I don't know that. So what I'd like to see a more empirical side of this. I would like to see us look at current subdivisions that have been developed, that are fully housed, fully populated, rerun the exact same traffic study that was run 20, 30, 40 years ago, and see if it corresponds. It should. Theoretically, the traffic study done 20 or 30 years ago should correspond with current traffic patterns that have developed coming in and out of these subdivisions. That being said, if they do correspond, I think we've got some good evidence that these traffic studies are accurate and that maybe we have to look at the criteria, like I said before, but it may also show that the traffic studies are inaccurate one way or the other. And that's something I would like to see done. I don't think it's a very expensive proposition to run 10 to 15 additional traffic studies in the parish, but it's definitely something I'm going to push forward in the future. That's all I really have to say on this. I don't want to waste too much time on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawler. Mr. Joseph.
Yes. From our last meeting, brought up this, Doc, and basic, we was asking for somebody with the experience to basic come and talk to us on this. And from the notes here, Mr. Fournier, or Jerome, say that he didn't have the experience and we needed to look at contacting an expert on it. And from tonight, I think strategic planning, we need to make a motion that we're requesting from administration to get us a traffic engineer to come and talk to us about it, and then we can make a proposal up to the full council to move forward with that. And that is even hiring to do a RFP, you know, anything to move this further so we can see what direction we want to go. We know what direction we want to go. It's just the problem is we don't have the proper information or the expertise. So, I mean, my motion would be to request that administration provide us an expert to explain it or put an RFP out for that traffic study of where we can do it. That's all I have, Doc.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, John? Mr. Cagnali.
I understand the need for looking at this further. Some of the traffic studies that have come back have been alarming in the heavily populated areas in particular. And a lot of people say, well, it's common sense that it's going to have an effect on traffic, when the study says no significant impact. So concerns of the citizens, we're getting more congested every month in the parish. I agree with Councilman Joseph. We need to just let the administration know we want someone in here who can answer the questions about this very serious situation we're in, and how do we move forward to resolve it. So I'll second his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Cagnalotti. I think as the picture just showed, at least it flashed on my screen, there's no one here, unfortunately, as I alluded to earlier, from administration. Be that the parish president, legal counsel, our CA, Mr. Dawson, and let's be clear, since we have two Dawsons, that's Ken Dawson, or Mr. Joan Fournier, who this committee asked to be here. And I stress the word asked because here's what I want to say about all this. I'm not sure anymore whether this committee or any committees of the parish council or the full body itself, how we go about. Is it asking or is it commanding or whatever it is? All I know is that we need to have, I think as Mr. Joseph has said, assistance from the administration. And that means not only attending these meetings, but of course we can hear this motion in a minute and vote on it, and I fully intend to do that. But before that, I'm going to have my part about discussion. I think historically it's important to note the following. The councilmen on this committee with me probably don't know this because I didn't share necessarily these emails, which I'm going to put into the record now, that occurred back on January 31st in and around that time period between myself and Mr. Fournier when I first decided to put this on the agenda. I had been working with, before he was fired, former planning director Ricky Compton, who had cobbled together some language, several pages. It's in our packets again, as it was last time for our last meeting, on how we might alter 405.I, the traffic impact analyses of our code. That information, Mr. Compton indicated, was cobbled together from many different municipalities and parishes. Most heavily leaned upon was St. Tammany. I came last time with full intention to discuss that and to actually go over it line by line and to at least show the areas that I had concerned, because it was, as Ricky said, not intended to be a final draft at the time he was working on it. It just never, got to that stage. So I had some problems, and I was hoping maybe we would use that as a boilerplate. However, I'm respecting the will of this committee, and as Mr. Joseph said, we have a new director of planning and development, Mr. Fournier. Certainly would like to hear from him, and he was supposed to come here tonight, but he's not. Everyone needs to know I only learned about this about 24 hours ago. It was late yesterday afternoon that he had a, quote, scheduling conflict with a Capital Regional Planning transportation meeting that I think was scheduled tonight for like 4:30 to 7:30. So he's not here. And time, of course, right now is close to 7 o'clock. The emails I referred to back on January started in a thread as follows. From myself to Mr. Fournier, only copied to our parish secretary because I was trying to, Jessica Marco, just get this item on the agenda. Jerome, I enjoyed our chat on the phone earlier this morning, looking forward to working with you on what we discussed. Here's what we're working on to try to improve existing land development code traffic impact study analyses so that it can no longer be said, quote, traffic impact studies are not worth the paper they are printed on, unquote. And that's a quote I borrowed from former parish expert in traffic, a traffic engineer, Bob Horner, who did a theoretical study for me at my request, and that of when Councilman Schexnayder chaired this committee, to look at 200 rooftops off of Highway 73 and let us know whether or not the methodology we're currently using is appropriate or not. And without going into great detail, he concluded it was not, and that's his quote, in fact, that these studies aren't worth the paper they printed on. That certainly got my attention. Further on to Jerome, I write, I've been told that the attached document was being cobbled together, and that's the document I referred to from Mr. Compton that I included in this email, from other Louisiana parish and municipality codes leaning heavily upon, as I said, St. Tammany. Jerome very graciously and professionally answered me immediately, also on January 31st, within hours. Councilman, sadly, the first line is a red flag. Please contact the administration, he writes, with regards to my work on this matter. I'm pleased to work with you, but parish codes, I'm told, requires me to get approval from administration. Well, that was certainly news to me. And without going into the rest and honoring Mr. Joseph's request that we be as brief as possible tonight, since Mr. Fournier is not even here, I won't read the rest of the email. But like I say, this ran up a red flag to me. And so in my answer to him, I wrote back that I would like to, without going heavily into that email, see what is this parish code that you're talking about that I have to ask your boss for you to help this committee do its job. And he wrote back on February 1st, 9:48 in the morning, Councilman Sadly, Doc, per your request, attached is reference to section 422, quote, restrictions, unquote, of the parish homeroom charter. That said, I am more than willing to assist you with this important matter, and like you, feel that we need to modify our traffic study requirements. In fact, that's where I got the language that's listed in the agenda today of reworking and increasing specificity. So I'd fully disclosed to him what was going on before he was hired, and while Mr. Compton was here, and the very fact that I'd want him to take a look at that, and he's saying, you know, I'm willing to take a look at that, I agree with you, we need to tweak things and so forth and so on, but I have to ask his boss, apparently President Matasset, for him to participate. I wrote him back a tome. I'm not going to read it again to respect OJ tonight.
Thank you, Doc.
But I am going to turn this over to the media for general public consumption. I'm just going to read an excerpt or two that I think is important, okay? I indicate to him that I read section 422, okay? And just so for the record, so everybody knows at least what that says, it says essentially that the council, the members of the governing authority, I'm quoting here, shall not direct or supervise parish employees or parish officers who are subject to the direction and supervision of the president. And I'd just like to say right now, I've never directed or supervised anyone, and I think it's a misreading, frankly, of that code to suggest that any of us do this. After all, these individuals, when I say these, are here as part of their job description to assist us, period. And I've never known that we had to ask Mr. Malcolm Dugas, for example, to be here when we have a bond council issue, or we have to ask Mr. Eads to be here when we have something with economic development, or do we ask Mr. Harry Robert to be here when we have something to do with insurance for our employees, or even tonight, Mr. Connolly is here to film this meeting. I'm sure if we asked him, he would say that's in his job description and just expected to do. Nonetheless, having told him I do not seek to direct or supervise you, Jerome, per section 422 of the code, I have the following to offer. I can only surmise that the reason that I am now being treated differently from my colleagues in securing the appropriate and most qualified Ascension Parish taxpayer-paid employees to appear before the Strategic Planning Committee is that, as chair, I have been critical of the president and have made attempts to place resolutions of no confidence and a call for his resignation on past council agendas. Since the administration is choosing to cite, however, 422, and I won't repeat it, it's this business about not directing or supervising Jerome or anybody else, okay? I have the following to offer. For the past, let me put my cheaters on here, my eyesight's not as good as it was at one time. 5 years of my service as a duly elected councilman District 4, which covers 2 separate administrations, I have never, emphasis on word never, including this current incident, directed or supervised any parish employee to do anything or told them what to do. I simply asked you, not ordered or commanded you, as I have done so of you and other experts in the past, which I believe is my job, to help our committee and to try to attend our next meeting in order to benefit from your expertise. A request which would, I believe, greatly advantage our parish. If Mr. Matassa believes otherwise, please tell him he is free to call or write me about his feelings. I have never received anything from President Matassa or any other member of the administration concerning that. Can you imagine the extra layers of bureaucracy and the nightmarish messes that would occur if there were to be, quote, no double standards for all councilmen were henceforth had to ask Kenny's permission for Bill Root to give us.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
You're out of order, Mr. Joseph.
Mr.
I believe I have the floor.
I'll make a
You
motion
do.
on the question.
You do, Doc, but, you know, this, I mean, I understand where you're coming from.
Mr.
You just
Joseph,
have
I
a problem
have,
with
Mr.
administration.
Joseph, I have the floor. Mr. Joseph, I believe I have the floor. I got a few more things to put in the record, and you can speak as long as you like, sir.
You
And I will
don't have to
respect
read it
that.
out loud. You can just put it in the minutes, in the record.
Well, then I don't think the public get to see it that way.
Well,
And I think it's important that we educate the public about what's going on in this parish.
I'm pretty sure we have a report out there, and he would definitely take a copy of it, and he would report it to the public. You know, Doc, I just think.
All right, I tell you what, I'm just going to read one more thing. Not everybody feels the way you do, OJ. This is from Councilman Terry Casso, okay?
Well, I'm going to make a motion on the question, and that is appropriate at this time.
If I recognize you, you can make the motion. You can't just interrupt someone that has the floor. Do you all not understand Robert's Rules of Order?
And the Robert Rules of Order
You
allows
cannot
a
just
motion
call a
on the question. Yes, it does.
if you have the floor.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. And I guarantee it's so, and I'll send it to you. It requires that you have the floor in order to make that motion. And sir, you are out of order.
I disagree, but that's okay.
That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Casso writes on March 8th, 2017, before I was rudely interrupted, I do not understand or appreciate this communication. It has never worked to have to seek assistance in this way. If I need to speak to Bill Rue, for example, or Ken Dawson, or Brendan O'Day, are you telling me as chair of finance I need to call Cinnamon? This is ridiculous. And she sent that to Bill Dawson. I wrote back, I concur with Councilwoman Casso. This is a ridiculous communication. And to go on and talk again, and I will stop there, about the same feelings I have with this committee on trying to get people that work for this parish to come forward and do their jobs without having to ask, and I did use the word, and I will send it, Mr. Joseph, to the media, since you suggested it, that I'm not going to ask Daddy, okay, for permission to have people that need to be here. Once again, let's all look at the monitor, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see no one, zero, zilch, nada, from this administration is present here tonight. Now, my colleagues keep telling me that this parish is not broken, it's not crippled. How is that so? This is probably one of the most important ordinances in our parish because it regulates whether or not traffic impact studies are valid or not. And our planning commission constantly complains and points fingers at this council that we need to do something about it and pass specific changes to our ordinances with some teeth so that they have the ability to turn down things where it's justified. How do we get that done? Now, I will yield the floor if someone would like to make a motion to call the question.
I would just like the motion to move forward. We have a motion and we have a second that we requested. Administration.
Right, we were in discussion, and that's what I was doing, Mr. Joseph.
No.
So are you asking to call the question, or you just want to go ahead? Is there any further, it's been moved and seconded that we somehow get the administration or someone from them here on this ever important issue to tell us whether or not we have inside expertise, whether or not we can hire a firm and what that might cost and so forth to alter the language in this traffic impact analyses ordinance 405-I. Any further discussion?
None, move forward.
Hearing none, any objection? Hearing none, motion carries 4-0. Madam Secretary, if you're looking at home, let the record show the chair is not voting to ask once again. I'm ready to proceed now, but I will do the will of this committee. So the vote is 4-0 that we ask the administration, in which case that's the committee will, that's what we'll do. Motion carries. Item number 8, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Lawler, second by Mr. Cagnolati. This meeting is adjourned.